I don't even know where to begin to explain how absolutely hyped I was for Halo 3 before it came out. I mentioned this in my Bungie video, but in the months leading up to release, I would watch the VDoc Et tu Brute every morning, where Bungie devs would talk about the changes they were making to the brutes in Halo 3. I was counting down the days to Halo 3's release. I've never been as excited for a game as I was for Halo 3. I wasn't the only one either. After the notorious cliffhanger at the end of Halo 2's campaign, there was a ton of excitement and anticipation for the conclusion of Master Chief's story, as well as the chance to see what Bungie could do with Halo on a next-gen system. According to this random yet oddly specific video game sales wiki I found, when Halo 3 was finally released, it sold the fastest of any game ever to that point, getting $170 million in sales in the first day and selling 2.5 million copies. The hype was real, and the game immediately had a huge player base for multiplayer and, more importantly, finishing the fight. Which, for the record, I never actually hated the cliffhanger ending to Halo 2. I was only 4 when Halo 2 came out, and by the time I was good enough at video games to actually beat Halo 2, Halo 3 was probably only a year away from release, so I had less of a wait than people who beat it around launch, and when you're a kid, it's easier for you to overlook bad stuff, but regardless, the one thing the ending did do is get me super excited for Halo 3. So when Halo 3 did come out and I got my pre-ordered Legendary Edition that came with the Master Chief display helmet, the first thing I did was play the campaign. With my dad, because I was a child and he's who actually paid for everything. Halo 3 was the Halo game when I was growing up, which means I've played it more than any other Halo game, and it's not even close. So, did Halo 3 live up to its insane hype? Yes. Mostly. I was really interested before the game came out to find out what they'd do for the first level of Halo 3. My 7-year-old brain thought it would have to be in a ship because that's how the first 2 games started. While not a ship, I think the jungle is an interesting enough environment, and Sierra 117 serves well as a tutorial level and introduction to the game. 3 things again introduced jumped out to me right at the start. First, the return of the assault rifle and Magnum. This blew my mind that they were back along with the BR and SMG from Halo 2. And I think they did a good enough job making these guns fit together, although obviously the battle rifle is the best of the 4 and you'll use it the most. Second thing, the Arbiter. I love the Arbiter story in Halo 2, and getting to fight alongside him is awesome. I think he could have been handled better in this game though, but I'll elaborate more on that in a bit. The third thing I noticed is one I was looking forward to, the brutes. They are completely redone in this game. I said in my Halo 2 Legendary video that I preferred the brutes in that game because they feel like a different enemy, whereas the brutes in Halo 3 feel too much like elites. I still think there is something to that, but after playing through Halo 2 a couple weeks ago for that video and Halo 3 on Legendary on my livestream that you can watch on this very channel, I think I was a bit too harsh. The brutes in this game are different than elites. There are obvious things like brute shots, spikers, and spike grenades, or their armor and ranking system capped off by chieftains which serve as mini-bosses, but there's also AI behaviors like berserking, or that you'll see one brute throw a grenade followed by every other brute doing the same because they're a pack. With that too, brutes are easier to kill than elites were, so there's a lot more of them thrown at you over the course of the game and in single encounters like the barracks in Crow's Nest. Speaking of Crow's Nest, it's one of my favorite levels in the game, even though it has one of the worst lines in video game history in its opening cutscene.
Ma'am, squad leaders are requesting a rally point. Where should they go?
To war.
Between Pillar of Autumn, Cairo Station, and Crow's Nest, there's just something about repelling invading Covenant and enclosed spaces that I really like. Crow's Nest isn't in a ship, but it's what I thought the first level of Halo 3 would be. It introduces drones, which I prefer in this game over Halo 2. In Halo 2, drones are individually really tough, and you only fight a few at a time, whereas in this game, each drone is a lot weaker, but they throw a ton at you in each encounter, which makes more sense for bugs. The barracks section I mentioned earlier also helps further establish just how brutal the brutes are, where you see a Marine get yeeted into a pile of other dead Marines and come across a few brute interrogation/torture sessions. But despite your best efforts, the base gets overrun and you blow it up, resulting in a sprint to an elevator, cryptic messages from Cortana that interrupt gameplay, and the next mission, Savo Highway. Savo Highway isn't bad, but I have more fun driving through everything than stopping to do it how you're supposed to, which I feel like is a knock against it. It is the first vehicle level of the game, which means you're introduced to the brute chopper, which I think was a great addition. In the second half of this level, after a holdout section, you get a chance to drive both a chopper or a wraith if you steal one, and I think this is definitely the stronger part of the level. I honestly don't have that much to say about Savo Highway, so I'm going to use this opportunity to shoehorn my thoughts on equipment. It's fine. I don't absolutely love it or think it's terrible and hate it. It's an interesting idea that I think works for Halo 3. Anyway, after driving around blowing up vehicles and killing brutes, you reach the town of Voy and the next level, the Storm. Story-wise, the Storm is pretty simple. Your objective is to blow up anti-air race and a big AA gun, but from a gameplay perspective, the Storm is another great level. The highlight is definitely the introduction of the Scarab. The Scarab in Halo 2 kinda sucked. It was basically a giant set piece where you killed a few groups of enemies and then it magically blew up in a cutscene with no explanation. The Scarab in Halo 3 has its own AI, the encounters are dynamic and don't play out exactly the same way every time. You also have options for how to take them on. In this encounter, you can drive around a Marine with a rocket launcher and let them shoot the Scarab. You could use a gravity lift if you time it right, or you could take an elevator upstairs and drive or jump off the platform onto the Scarab. There's probably other crazy stuff that you could do that I don't even know about, but the point being that it's a sandbox and you can deal with the Scarab however you want. This hits on a running thread throughout the game. Whether it's the Brutes, Jackal Snipers, Scarab, or so on, a big part of this game's development seemingly was Bungie looking back at what they'd done in the past and just making things better based on their own ideas and or community feedback. These changes are mostly for the better with one giant exception. But back to the Storm, you finish the level by blowing up an AA gun. This is where the story of Halo 3 actually begins. As much as I like the level design and gameplay in the first 4 levels, with the only slight hiccup being Savo Highway, in terms of story, it's really lacking. Basically, all that happens is you get found by Johnson, go to a base and get told you need to blow up an AA gun, drive to Voy, and then blow up an AA gun. That's it. The slipspace portal getting open and the flood ship crashing on Earth is the first point in the game where you feel like the story is actually getting somewhere, and that takes us to Floodgate. Floodgate is one of my favorite flood levels across all the games. Seeing the flood completely overrun a human city is awesome and a great way to introduce them to this game. This is also helped by the flood being the best in this game by far of the trilogy. Them being able to transform living things and dead bodies into combat forms in front of you is great and really adds to the horror element. Combat forms themselves are weaker in this game than in Halo 2, but like with drones, the trade-off is that they throw way more at you than in Halo 2, which makes sense. The flood should feel overwhelming because of their numbers, not because each one is a walking tank. Speaking of tanks, the caveat to the praise I just gave is that the pure forms are awful. Actually, that's not even fair. The tank forms and stalker forms are fine. It's these guys. They do a crazy amount of damage and they are absolute bullet sponges. They are super annoying to take out, and unless you can sword them, stick them, or you have an explosive weapon of some kind, it takes a while. This level is also the first where you get to fight alongside elites, which as a kid I thought was the coolest thing ever, the elites being teamed up with the humans. But the level ends with you going into the flood ship and finding a message from Cortana, then everyone argues for a bit, and then they decide to go through the slipspace portal that the Covenant opened. This takes you to the Ark, and the next level, whose cutscene features the best line from the shipmaster.
Brute ships, staggered line. Shipmaster, they outnumber us 3-1.
Then it is an even fight.
The Ark is one of the 2 best levels in the game. It starts with one of the few sniping sections in Halo 3, then takes you to a vehicle section, to a tank section, to a Scarab fight, to a structure that's reminiscent of the Silent Cartographer. This game has been out for 15 years, but one thing I had no idea about until a few days ago is that the Brute Chieftain at the end of this level actually challenges you to a 1v1. None of the other Brutes will attack you unless you either shoot them first or you win the fight with the Chieftain. So it's an interesting encounter, but I'm guessing most players are like me and start shooting as soon as they see red on the reticle and missed it. Or maybe not, and I'm just oblivious. Let me know in the comments. This level is also historic for being the first ever Halo level with a terminal, which is now a staple of the franchise. There are 8 terminals total in Halo 3, 3 of them being on the Ark and 3 being on the Covenant. And the Covenant is definitely what I'd call a sister level to the Ark, in that they're both the only 2 levels that take place in the Ark, they're back-to-back in the game, and they're the 2 best levels in the game. Not only that, but I'd say they're 2 of the best levels across the entire franchise. My personal favorite is Gravemind from Halo 2, but I know that there are plenty of people who have either the Ark or the Covenant number 1, and understandably so. From beginning to end, this level is just non-stop. I really like the first tower, the Hornet section, the tank section, 2 Scarab fight, and teaming up with the Flood to stop Truth. Speaking of Truth, one of my few criticisms of Halo 3 is his character. In Halo 2, he's cunning and manipulative, whereas in Halo 3, he's just a raving lunatic. I think if they wanted to change his character that drastically, it should have been something that happened over the course of the game, but from the first time you see him in Crow's Nest to the moment the Arbiter kills him, he's insane. I mentioned earlier that I think the Arbiter could have been handled better. In Halo 2, he was a playable character with a ton of backstory who gets fleshed out over the game and has a real arc, going from a regular Covenant zealot to understanding that everything he believed was a lie. In Halo 3, he's a sidekick to Master Chief, which is fine itself, but that's all he is. I'm gonna come at you with a hot take. There's one thing they could have done to completely fix this. Ready? You should have played as the Arbiter on the Covenant. Hey, hear me out. I understand why you don't, and why you don't play as anyone other than Master Chief in this game, because a lot of the community was not exactly a fan of the Arbiter in Halo 2. But this level is where the Covenant is destroyed and Truth is killed. It completes the Arbiter's arc from Halo 2. He gets his revenge. I think from a story perspective, it would have been better and more satisfying to play as the Arbiter and get him to that point yourself. I just laid out a couple criticisms of the game, but make no mistake, the Covenant is my favorite level of Halo 3. I think from a gameplay and level design perspective, it's perfect. Cortana, on the other hand, is a level that's super important to the story and has a lot of emotional impact, but it's definitely the least fun level to play through in the game. There's a couple reasons for this. First, it's hard. It's the toughest mission in the game, by far. in large part because of the aforementioned range pure forms that put the gameplay to a complete stop at times while you try to figure out how to either kill them or get past them. Second, the environment. It's more interesting visually than the library, but it's still pretty samey throughout the level. It also mostly doesn't have any resemblance to High Charity in Halo 2. If you were going through the same rooms you went through in Halo 2 and you could see how they've changed since the Flood took over, I think it obviously would have been a lot more interesting. Lastly, the constant interruptions from Cortana and the Gravemind. These happen throughout the game, but there are so many in this level that constantly interrupt you while you're trying to play. It gets really annoying. Those are my gripes with it. I don't think it's terrible, but it's definitely the worst level in the game. It is cool though that after you rescue Cortana and are trying to escape, the Arbiter shows up to try and help you. That's a pretty good bro moment. And it does lead to my favorite closing level of any Halo game, which is appropriately titled Halo. You're back on the ring from the first game. Well, kind of. It's a partially rebuilt ring from the first game. But you climb a familiar pyramid in a snowy environment to get to a control room where 343 Guilty Spark kills Johnson and calls you Forerunner before you laser him. Then it's up to you and the Arbiter to escape. The ending to this game and trilogy is so perfect, I don't even know how to articulate it. It comes full circle. You blow up a ring at the end of Halo 1, you blow up a ring at the end of Halo 3. Halo 1 ends with the Warthog run, so does Halo 3. The Arbiter goes from protecting the ring and getting labeled a heretic because it was blown up, to now helping blow up the new ring.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
Driving a Warthog while everything around you is falling apart with the Arbiter manning the gun is, I don't know a better word for it, perfect. The score during this sequence is incredible too. But once you get to the end and make it into the ship, that's the end of Halo 3. For a game whose promise was to finish the fight, you do get to finish the fight. By the end of the game, the Covenant and the Flood are both destroyed. I think in terms of story, there are details that I don't like the Arbiter being mostly sidelined and Truth being a maniac and Keyes dying in a stupid way, but the ending was nonetheless a satisfying conclusion to the Halo trilogy. I won't say too much about Halo 3's multiplayer because the original game doesn't have servers anymore, so if you didn't experience it, you unfortunately never can. But some of my best memories as a kid were playing Halo 3 with my friends. I've seen a lot of people say custom games peaked with Reach, but for me it was Halo 3. Games like Duck Hunt, Fat Kid, Griffball, Infection, Predator, stuff that I don't have footage of to show you because they're dead. If you didn't experience Halo 3 custom games when they were alive, all I can tell you is it was amazing. I also at the time really liked Halo 3's customization and progression system. Unlocking new pieces of armor really incentivized me to play the game in ways I wouldn't have, like trying to get all the skulls or unlock all the launch achievements and later trying to complete the Vidmaster challenges or ranking up in multiplayer. I like that EXP and ranking up are based on wins and losses. It encouraged you to be a team player and party up with people who you played well with. I made a lot of Xbox Live friends that way. Halo 3 is my favorite multiplayer of the series. I know there's a lot of people who don't like it, mostly because they don't like that the weapons are projectile based instead of hit scan, but I never minded that. I am obviously biased. I remember being a kid waiting for Halo 3 to come out. I played it since I was a 7-year-old and I obviously have a level of nostalgia for it. But I liked a lot of other things as a kid that now as a 20-something I think suck. Rose-colored glasses or not, Halo 3 was a great game and a satisfying conclusion to the trilogy. It's one of those games that I beat more times than I can count, yet it still stays fun. Where I can do a live stream of me playing through the entire game on Legendary in one sitting and have a blast and not feel like a chore. There are things I like better in other Halo games, like for story I prefer Halo 2 and for customization I prefer Halo Reach, but all in all I've had more fun over the years playing Halo 3 than any other Halo game. So if you were to ask me what my favorite Halo game is, I think my answer would have to be Halo 3. I know I'm beating a dead horse, but can I just say that this IGN reviewer who gave Halo 3 a 9.5 and said it would have been an 11 out of 10 if you took the campaign out of it should win an award for dumbest reviewer of all time.
I mean, really, if you take out the campaign, this game is an 11 out of 10.
The game would be better with less content? What are you talking about? So stupid, my God.